Thank you all for being here today. What a robust turnout for an event such as this. And, my role, and again, as president of the University of Rhode Island Foundation, we're just a bit of the facilitator here in trying to bring parties together and ultimately for the good of the institution. But what, in my mind, can be more appropriate, and this is, I think, one of those projects where you feel that the planets are aligned.
You'll have to trust that I am standing behind this. I'm here welcoming you on behalf of the entire Division of Academic Affairs because we have interest in marine and environmental studies and programs across the curriculum. One thing we know about learners today, they really respond positively to experiential learning. The old days of the sage on the stage are pretty much over. Obviously, we've heard about how connected they are to technology, but I've seen incredible excitement when we can get them out into the field and they can do things. So this is a very important day where we'll have a chance to learn about possibilities that secondary school teachers and university teachers might play, whether you're talking about participating for a week at sea, a full summer session, and who knows, maybe even a semester at sea. I'm as eager to learn as you are about what might be possible. So thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us in what might be a very great adventure for years to come, providing students with intriguing educational experiences that will help them excel.
The response we got from Dean Winnie Brownell when we came over here one cold, snowy afternoon was just incredible. We thought we had about a half an hour meeting, and at the end of an hour and a half, and we were still talking around the table about what the possibilities might be for the Perry. But to give you a little bit of, I just want to give all of you some background on why we're here and how we've gotten here. A number of us that have been involved from the very beginning in what was called sail training in England, became the American Sail Training Association over here, but essentially was experiential, life-transforming experiences for youth and young adults on sailing vessels. That's one of the avocations that a number of us have had for these last nearly 40 years. Here in Rhode Island, even though we've been the headquarters for the whole national movement, we've never had a vessel doing any of this specific experiential education, life-changing event work. And so after the 2007 event, we decided as a board that we really wanted to make an effort to get into the business here in Rhode Island. And not long thereafter, one of our board members, Captain Richard Bailey of the former Rose, learned of a vessel that had been designed and built in Canada of about the size and nature that we were looking for, that had fallen on hard times. And so we went to Canada, and here in Amherstburg, Ontario, where the headquarters for the British had been for the War of 1812, the local citizens there had raised more than 2 million Canadian dollars, had designed and built in steel a replica of the HMS Detroit. And not being able to quite figure out what to do with this vessel, they had come on hard times. They hadn't been able to raise any money, and basically the vessel was foundering. So we bought it for $300,000 and towed it down to Newport. And it became obvious immediately that the connection between the Detroit and Oliver Hazard Perry, who had defeated the original Detroit, was which gave us, someone mentioned, and it may you, Glenn, about the many aspects of this project being cited, but clearly, immediately, we could see that we had a whole lot of things that were sort of going for this potential project in Rhode Island, with the name of the Oliver Hazard Perry, the fact that it had the connection with our maritime history and with a hero from Rhode Island and from Newport. So we renamed the vessel Oliver Hazard Perry, and she's here. It's the number of bodies that can be on board versus the cost of maintenance that really decides whether you are a 501c3 that has to raise money every single year just for your existence, or whether you can actually have a program that once built is actually self-sustaining because of what the services that you're providing to the people who are buying those services. And that's a key. So the fact that this vessel is in steel, new, and can carry, has a capacity larger than any other vessels of its type in this country doing this kind of work, and the fact that it had been completed but only the hull. So all of the accommodations, the school spaces, the deck layout, all of the design functions that we would need to do to do the work that we want to do, all to be planned. So we're not having to retrofit anything. We're not having to restore anything that is, actually should have ended its existence 30 or 40 years before. So it's one of those incredible opportunities. And also, as Rhode Islanders, we realized that if having the vessel here was just huge. There was just no way that we were going to be able to get this going, having to start from scratch and just decide we want to raise money to buy the vessel. We basically got a sort of a $2 million leg up by this opportunity, and so we got it here. We have the real possibility of doing something significant in this state, and being a symbol for this state for all kinds of excellence. So it's very exciting, and we're just so pleased to be able to be here with the momentum that we have generated in this downtime and come out of this down economy with something that's absolutely real. Because I think that we can do altogether something that will be extraordinary for the state and for our educational institutions. And all of us that are part of it can point a few years from now to this project as being really significant, not just for Rhode Island, but for the country, because we're one of the few programs in this type of experiential education that has this model that we're presenting to you, where we're not trying to build a standalone anything. We're not trying to compete with this grade school or that college program, whatever. We are the experiential partner with all of your programs. So we do the experiential education, we provide the platform, and because the economics are spread out for a lot of different other things that happen, your program doesn't have to pay for the whole cost of the ship, just the part of it that you're using. And so we think that we can integrate into a lot of different programs without competing with any of them. So I've gone on too long, but anyway.
So the question becomes, why did we buy this? When you look at it, it's somewhat unimpressive. But as Bart said, it was an opportunity. It's the right size. It's the maximum size that you can build a sailing school vessel to the U.S. regulations. She's well built. If you look at her and you say, ooh, that's a big, black, ugly, mess of steel. If you go down below, as a layperson, you might say, well, there's angles and, it's painted white. But having been in the business and having seen a lot of poorly designed steel structures and poorly thought out steel structures, she's well thought out in terms of the structure. There's a lot of continuity, and it's just, to me, a thing of beauty down below. And the workmanship was very good. I think, as Bart said, she wasn't too far along. We kind of caught her right when we wanted her. She is finished. She's weather tight. She doesn't let water in, but she's not taken to the next level. She doesn't have cannons or something that we have to get rid of, that sort of thing. Whatever. I mean, she's not rigged as a pirate vessel, really, as is the de rigueur these days. She's in fresh water, so she's in good condition, and obviously she was very well priced for what we got. We're going to add an additional deck to this vessel, and the first reaction lay people will say is making it less stable. You're adding high weight, and that's a frequent misconception in even operators of boats that I have designed. They think their boat is the stablest when it is deep in the water, very low center of gravity. To some extent, that's true. It's initially stable. But adding the additional deck, next slide, adding the additional deck has the benefit of providing you with intact buoyancy above the waterline. and this is a common thing that we have to teach people that use ships every day. One of the biggest things that helps you is to have this intact buoyancy above the waterline. As the boat heels over further and further, this portion of buoyancy is helping you remain upright. And in the stability regulations, if you're going to go out in the open ocean with a sailing school vessel, your range, in other words, the angle to which the vessel can go and still come back is over 90 degrees. So essentially the boat has to lay on its side, still be able to come back. And this provides that for us. Now, at least in its current configuration, we envisioned the type of accommodations that are common on sail training vessels today, where you have 3 bunks and, you know, it's communal living. It's not luxury yacht accommodations. But one of the things that we learned with doing research vessels is when we did the ship for the University of Delaware, they wanted everything to be modular. Everything had to be bolted down because you don't know what your science mission is going to be in 5 years or 10 years. So there's nothing to say that we can't have knockdown bulkheads and larger cabins down below if there was perhaps a better heeled clientele that you know wanted to go out for a longer cruise. We determined we had to add that extra deck for stability purposes, and then we came to the obvious conclusion that, well, that gives us a lot of space, and the space that we need. So this space would be filled with the living quarters and the working quarters on board the boat. This sort of space can be for teaching, for meetings, and also we envision sort of a nav station, nav classroom aft. The rest of the deck is taken up with 2-person staterooms, heads that are not private heads at this time. If you had private heads, you would have less cabins. It's pretty simple. We've envisioned a classroom / lab / library space on this deck. On the main deck, we envision one larger deck house, which would be for classroom experience and navigational classes. Richard's been on some of the other sail training vessels and saw, I think it was the Virginia that you saw, a space like that, which is good. I mean, it's open, it's airy. You don't want to be in the hold of the ship trying to learn about biology. You know, you want to see what you're learning about. There's been a lot of talk recently about putting a container, a lab van on deck. My firm just coincidentally, they've used those for years on the research vessels, but about 10 years ago, we helped standardize the design of the lab vans for the U.S. research fleet, at least the university research fleet. So I have a lot of experience with them and also coming up with unique ways to tie them down so it could be on the deck 1 minute, used as a lab. On your next cruise, you take it off and you wouldn't even know that it was supposed to be there. Typically, on a research vessel, if you've ever been on the Endeavor, her entire deck is covered with holes. They don't go through to the below decks, but they're threaded holes. It's a common, they're called Woods Hole tie downs because Woods Hole came up with them. And they're the same on every research ship in the country. They're 2-foot by 2-foot patterns. So if Delaware has a winch, they want to send it to URI, it fits. And typically on a research vessel, you'd cover your whole deck with them. I don't know that that's probably a wise thing to do, but we could provide an area with a pattern of Woods Hole tie downs that would allow you to put a small portable winch, a davit for over-the-side use, that sort of thing. And also a removable portion of the bulwarks that allow you to overboard equipment. The other thing I forgot to mention is how green is the ship going to be? Obviously the big buzzword is sustainability and green. And depending on the budget and when products are available, we would love to make this vessel as green as possible. We would put solar panels in the limited space that's available. We can't really put them on deck. We can put them on houses one of the things that the Corps with Kramer at SEA did years ago was to have a shaft generator. So when they were sailing without power, they would drag their prop, and that would turn the shaft, and it would then create electricity. So you can store all that in, new technology sort of batteries. The ultimate, excuse me, would be to make the vessel diesel electric. The University of Delaware boat that we designed is diesel electric. That means that it has 4 generators, and all the power that goes to the propulsors is electric. That allows them to share loads between their refrigeration, their winches, etc. And it can be more efficient in a situation like that. In other words, you don't have to have 2 engines idling all the time while you're going through a passage. If you're going very slow, you can drop it down to 1 generator, that sort of thing. It also provides the opportunity to use new technologies. We looked at it for the University of Delaware, but we weren't able to use a fuel cell that was small enough and light enough to get on board the vessel. But those technologies are improving daily. So if you did have a fuel cell and you had a diesel electric propulsion plant, you could plug that into the system and power the vessel that way. There's all sorts of green technologies. Obviously, we'd have waste treatment and zero discharge on the sewage and gray water. But the greenest aspect of the vessel is all those sails. It's the oldest green technology out there, and I think that's the real benefit of this.
Could you explain more about what a lab van is?
A lab van is the research fleet years ago. Actually, everybody started using standard ISO containers, the ones you see on a container ship coming into a port. It's a convenient unit because it's sturdy, they're all the same, they're fairly inexpensive, and you can attach them to a deck of a ship to secure them to the ship. What used to happen, you see Bob Ballard's ship, he would have containers with equipment to run his ROVs, etc. They used to come to a ship and, this one would be one way and the electricity would be one way and the plumbing would be another way. So about 10 years ago, we decided to standardize them throughout the fleet. The research fleet uses them for all sorts of things, but probably the most common is as a scientific lab. So they'll put counters in there that are removable, fume hoods, they'll have an air conditioning unit, escape hatches, and the electrical is now all the same for every one. So there's no danger when you come and plug it in. Everybody knows, oh, this is a lab van, we plug it in just like so. And they're secured to the deck. You don't have to worry about, geez, did that guy tighten the chain down, and that sort of thing. There are ones that are made out of aluminum for weight critical applications, and for instance, University of Delaware used to have one that was, I think, 10 or 12 feet long, so you can't make them smaller. But the other beauty of it is you can take it off and put it on. In terms of a big research vessel in the fleet, they may need a lab van one time, and they may need a storage van the next time. And some of the very large ships actually have berthing vans, so you can put a van on deck and people can sleep in it. On this vessel, you might be able to have a fairly consistent type of van. But if you can take it off, it gives you the opportunity to put something else there, some sort of machinery or instrument or water table.
Well, every journey starts with a mission statement, and we're the same. The operative word here, though, for us today is comprehensive. And what we seek to develop here is a at-sea program that will be rigorous academically, and that will be sufficiently in tune with the institutions who have their students on board, that it will be a full credit course, whether it's for a high school student for a week or a college student for a semester. What we hope will happen here is that we will end up increasing the SSV capacity in the region. We clearly sense that there is a need for more capacity. More people want to go to sea. There are more students seeking these sorts of experiential programs and at-sea programs. And so we see a market that is in some ways a little underserved, and we hope to fill that void. We are Rhode Island centric, and we're here today to start on a journey with all of you to ensure that the ship that we build and the programs that we devise work for you, work for Rhode Island. We also see a function where we should work to make Rhode Island or southeastern New England more aware of its at-sea capabilities, opportunities, and obviously to learn really what's out there. And most people don't understand that out there in that ocean, after you get to Point Judith, that there really is a whole other world that needs exploration. That is, in fact, a wonderful world that many people just don't seem to understand, and we hope to change. We hope to change that. We expect to have students from 12 to 18 to benefit from these programs. We're casting our net widely here, and hoping to work with you to define just what those programs will be. We also expect to create programming that will relate to some of the unique problems and opportunities that are within this whole region, within Narragansett Bay, the Sound, and so on and so forth, and take into account issues of global warming, climate change, pollutions, the fisheries, and so on and so forth. First and foremost, we are a movable classroom, and we can take our classroom to the shores of Brazil, the Gulf of Maine, to Narragansett Bay, or anywhere in between. And where else can you do that? You can't take the Oliver Hazard Perry Middle School to Maine, but we can take their students to Maine. That's the value and the benefit of this kind of an opportunity. We will be teaching teamwork. If there is nothing else that gets taught on the deck of a ship, it's that everybody is a member of a team, and the ship runs because of the teamwork and the level of teamwork that is there. We also teach leadership. When you're at sea, you're in many ways alone, and in many instances you will be expected to make decisions that perhaps you've never made before. And Caroline, I think, will speak a little bit about that. And that empowers these students, and it's wonderful to see. It's truly wonderful to see. Also interesting is that the students on shipboard are well outside their comfort zone. So the day never ends. It's 24 hours long. You don't get to go home, have a nice pizza dinner, crawl into bed with your iPod, talk to your friends on the computer, whatever. You're there all the time, and you're either studying or taking care of the ship or sleeping. Obviously, the hallmark of this program is that it's interdisciplinary. We will be able to teach humanities as well as scientific courses. We'll be able to teach biology, geology, physics, astronomy, you name it. We have a considerable number of days at sea that we can design for everybody and make sure that we have the diversity of the programming that you all need, including we have day trips planned, we have weeks, voyages, and we have semester voyages. Sorry, I got that wrong. That's semester, weeks, and day trips. We also have two shoreside periods planned, 2 4-week periods where the ship will refit and repair at Newport. And that obviously is the opportunity for the marine trades. I know the Iris people in Charahoe are here, but that's the time that those students or interns would get on board and help with the refit and repair. But the rest of the time here is the 12,000 student days that you all have available. Accommodations, there will be accommodations for 85 for day programs and 36 night. Again, those are conservative numbers. The deck modules Dave has talked about, the labs. We will have male and female berthing, take care of that issue that may not arise, or could. And we talked about wheelchair accessibility as well. And as we'll see, Caroline had friends with guitars, and there's a lot of singing about on deck.
So I just want to kind of walk you through what a day is like. I had a lot of friends who said, oh, you're sailing in the Caribbean. Wow, that sounds really tough. Like, they just thought I kind of sat in a deck chair eating, tropical fruits and getting a tan, and that was absolutely not the case. And I think if anyone had gone on the boat thinking that, they would have been off at the first port stop. So, okay, so I was in the second class to go out for SEA that was in this new program called Documenting Change in the Caribbean. Historically, SEA has been very science-heavy, focusing on collecting oceanographic data. Basically, if you can imagine the U.S. highway system, that's about the amount of data in comparison to, the roads versus the total surface area of the U.S. that we have about the oceans. So we were still working the labs 24/7. We were still doing science. It's really hysterical to see English majors who are seasick at 4 in the morning trying to remember how to do the Winkler titration method in the lab while the deck is pitching. But we persevered and we stepped up because it's, recognizing that it's a really important part of what SEA does. And, some of the research that we were doing collecting plastic trash in the oceans has recently been published by a Japanese research firm, and that was really exciting. To be like, hey, I'm an art major from Brown, but I helped with that. And I guess I just want to emphasize that, especially with this new program, all the students came from such a diverse background, different kinds of schools. There were state schools represented, there were Ivy League schools represented. It was just a really neat mishmash of people. We had a performance piano major, and we had business ec majors. It was just this great group of kids coming together. And I think that the common ground was that we used the ocean as the sort of basis for asking a lot of questions and for tying in what we were learning. Watch duties, in general, you were doing anything from manning the deck, sailing the boat, handling sails, to working in the lab, dishwashing. You have not lived until you've washed dishes for 6 hours straight. But we had a good time, actually. We did a lot of singing. And you could be helping the engineer. I learned how to change the oil on the main generator, and now I change the oil on my truck. So, really important life skills. And everyone's favorite, at night you would post a lookout at the bow to do bow watch for hour-long segments, and that was really kind of, it was serious. You were looking out for traffic and everything, but it was also a really kind of fun job. I guess what you can glean from this, the beginning of my day, is that there's an emphasis on punctuality, eating, sun protection, and also that you were extremely busy when you're on watch. There was hardly enough time to check the boat every half an hour and make entries in the log, but that was really what you had to be quick about doing. And there was also a heavy emphasis on celestial navigation. In the SEA runs a shore component before you go out to sea, where you're really doing intensive class from 9 to 5, living at their campus in Woods Hole. And we were learning a lot of the calculations, but then when we got out to sea, we were actually getting to use the sextant, plot fixes, do dead reckoning from those points. Obviously, there was always GPS running in the background, but for a lot of times, we were not allowed to look at that. And I think that speaks to the ability of these programs to create informed sailors who really know what they're doing, understand navigation. I really was able to connect with my grandfather after this. He was a navigator for a long time in the Navy and is a retired captain. And he was kind of like, I want you to learn the equation of time while you're out there. And I kind of learned it. It's really complicated. But this was great. I really enjoyed this, and some people were better at actually getting the fixes, and other people were better at the calculations. I was a number cruncher, wasn't great with the sextant, it's really hard to use. And this is class time. We had class every afternoon, and the crew would take the deck. for us, and class was held on the quarterdeck, which was pretty amazing. And here, there was a big emphasis on the students teaching the classes, and you would kind of have a specific thing that you would prepare. So here are my friends Lisa and Matt, who I've continued to be extremely close with, are doing a presentation on phylosoma, which are lobster larvae. And fun fact, that critter was used to design the alien in the movie Predator. They're pretty weird looking and huge. They're really interesting to dig up in the nets. Recreational time means when you're done with your homework, which you're doing when you're not on watch, then you have time to do fun stuff. And there was a lot of different things going on. We weren't allowed to have our iPods, so we made a lot of our own music, did a lot of drawing and kind of crafty things. My homework included counting coliform bacteria under an epifluorescent microscope in a room that was about 120 degrees. So it was always nice to get out on the deck and sketch and stuff. When this is my friend Adriana's sketches. She's was an art major at Sarah Lawrence. Can you go to the next? Yeah. And you know, there was a lot of music happening. Again, like Mary Malloy was great, and our captain were great with teaching us sea shanties. And I'm not talking about like Drunken Sailor sea shanty. I mean like really cool old songs that have a lot of roots in Irish and English nautical tradition, and are actually used to inform nautical history. Next slide. And my favorite thing, they had just replaced the mainsail on the Kramer and had the entire old one in the LAS. And so we were allowed to help ourselves. And I came back with about 40 pounds of sailcloth in my suitcase, which I'm still using. But people were really into making bags. And of course, that was a traditional thing aboard working sail. And it's a way to learn how to patch sails and do different kinds of needlework, and then it's also a fun way to pass the time. Some of my watchmates immediately went on to get deckhand jobs and are trying to build up their hours so that they can go for their captain's licenses, and time on the SCA ships counts towards that as sea time, obviously. And for other people, it just sort of informed their liberal arts education and gave them valuable life skills. For me, it's really been a constant source of inspiration in my artwork at Brown, and it's making its way into my senior thesis exhibit. And you know, it really challenged me socially, physically, and mentally, and taught me a lot about what I can do when I'm pushed. We had some of you may be familiar with this if you hang around college campuses enough. We had an expression on board called boot and rally. Basically everyone was seasick. It was just a fact, and the boat still had to sail. So you had to just deal with it and keep going. And so, you know, it was a really life-changing experience, and I don't think that I'm going to become the captain of a ship, but it's, that doesn't matter because it was just, you know, my biggest complaint was that it wasn't long enough. It was 6 weeks, and I was finally like really in the swing of things, and then it was time to get off. So that's really my one complaint about the program. The first 2 days we were out at sea, we were in 30-foot seas, and that was really scary for me, and it was definitely, it felt like that baptism by fire. But you always had mates looking over your shoulder, and they would the way that they handled it was they weren't going to tell you what to do all the time, but they would tell you if you were doing something wrong. So you had to use your head, but that was great because it taught you to figure things out for yourself, kind of.
One of the best things that we ever did at the Coast Guard Academy was at the end of each summer, the new cadets who had just arrived in early July as 18, 19-year-olds, sometimes 17, and had spent probably 4 to 6 weeks in a sort of a boot camp environment on the, doing, learning close order drill and doing things like that around the Coast Guard Academy, were then taken for a 4 or 5 day cruise on Eagle. And, there was no preparation in terms of, many of them, most of them probably done some work in the boats, but And it was just astonishing to see what happened to them in 4 or 5 days. You wouldn't believe how, I mean, yeah, they were, boot, what was it, boot and rally? Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of that, but it's just amazing what you can do with a group of young people on a ship. So.
Thank you very much. I'm Rob Mather. I'm a professor of history and archaeology at the University of Rhode Island, and it's a pleasure to be here, and I'm delighted to talk about undergraduate opportunities on board the Oliver Hazard Perry. So what might URI's involvement look like? There are different ways and different levels of that. Certainly there are possibilities that we might involve, maybe some non-credit things that we might do. Certainly there are opportunities for undergraduate credit. One of the things that I'm particularly interested in is the way that we can combine teaching and research together. And I think that's very evident in the SEA program, that you have research programs and educational credit granting programs working hand in hand, and so the two things work together very well. So what are the subject areas here? Well, I think there really are no real limits on this. The ones that come to my mind initially are subjects in the humanities and the social sciences, because that's where I'm based. So certainly the subject of maritime history and the literature of the sea. I do underwater archaeology, maritime anthropology, maritime studies, and so forth. Environmental humanities. There are a number of folks here at the university that are involved in those kinds of subject areas, and marine affairs. Also in terms of things like natural resource economics. But traditionally in the science-based sail training ships that are out there, things like oceanography, marine biology, coastal ecology, those things are generally taught on board the vessels, fisheries, and so forth. And there are even things in engineering. We have an engineering course that was based on board the sail training vessel as well. So I don't think there's any real limits in terms of the kinds of things that we could teach. Perhaps they have some thematic connection to the oceans, but it doesn't have to be so. You could teach mathematics. You could teach applied mathematics on board the sail training ship. I think one of the biggest questions is the extent to which this becomes a science research platform. And I don't know the answer to this. What kind of sampling systems, what kind of instrumentation, whether or not the vessel will support scuba diving or not, I think are all big questions. And so the way that I approached answering that question was to look again at SEA, that we have heard about quite a bit today. Obviously they're based out of Woods Hole, and they have these two ships, the Siemens and the Kramer. And so what do these vessels have in terms of the science capacity? Well, each I think has 3 winches. I think the maximum amount of cable on any of the winches is 4,000 meters. I think that's the case. They have some bathymetric equipment. They have a sub-bottom profiler, which is a system that uses sound to look into the sediments in the bottom of the ocean. They also have some echo sounding capacity, some single beam sonars. They have a sea carousel, which is a profiler and a suite of instruments that can do water samples and water sample analysis. They have CTT units, which are current, temperature, and depth units. They have a hull-mounted acoustic Doppler current profiler, an ADCP, which is essentially an instrument that measures current, ocean currents. They can continuously track salinity and temperature and fluorescence as they sail on. They've got a little ROV like this one here. So essentially it's a little robot that they can put over the side and you can go down and take pictures and video and so forth. Various nets, dredges, gravity corers, sediment scoops, data loggers, and then some science labs. Although they're not removed, they're removable, so you don't have that flexibility. And of course, computer networks. What they don't have is they don't have any capacity to generate side scan sonar data, which is a towed instrument that uses sound to look at the bottom of the ocean. This is a picture of a shipwreck. This is a side scan sonar image of a wreck that we were looking at in the Great Lakes. And so they don't have that. They don't have the very high resolution multi-beam bathymetry systems. Obviously, because it's a sail ship, they don't have an A-frame. Neither of the vessels do diving, and they don't have this ISO science band capability. Well, the other thing they don't have, of course, which is something that many of the most advanced research vessels have, is dynamic position, which enables the ship essentially to stay put in the middle of the ocean because it has a sophisticated system of thrusters that tie into a GPS system. It says, you tell it to stay there, and it stays there. You tell it to move 2 meters this way, and it moves 2 meters this way. So they don't have that either. But nevertheless, these SCA vessels have a very high-level, sophisticated scientific capability. And one of the big questions for this project, and I think one of the big ways that the university can contribute, is to try and identify what the science capacity for the ship should be. If you go to the other end of the spectrum and think about another of the sail training ships, a vessel called the Niagara, it really has no science capability. This is pure experiential learning. It is a vessel whose mission is to talk about maritime heritage. It talks about the vessel and its programming, talks about the importance of the War of 1812, talks about maritime history on the Great Lakes, talks about sailing and naval warfare in the age of sail. And so this is a pure maritime historical heritage experience. But they define it very broadly in terms of the types of people that they try to attract. And in that way, they've been generally quite successful. They take in sea trainees, they take in volunteers who go to sea, they work with schools, they work with colleges. So a vessel like this can go in different directions. But certainly with the size of vessel that we're talking about here, and the capacity to and the range that it will have, it seems as if some relatively sophisticated level of science capability would be important. One of the things that I think would be interesting for me would be to combine my research program in underwater archaeology with the classes that I teach and bring those two things together. And one of the places I go to do that is Bermuda. And I think in a second I'll talk a little bit about what I do in Bermuda and the way that this might work together. But we also work on the Grand Banks. We have research projects out there. We work on the edge of the outer continental shelf. Over the last 10,000 years ago, we've had 10,000 years or so, we've had 70 meters of sea level rise. And what that means is that there is an awful lot of land, there's a lot of ocean floor that used to be dry land, and there is a huge potential for Native American sites right out to the edge of the continental shelf. So that's one of the reasons that we're particularly interested in the area out to the continental shelf. If you, 10,000 years ago, the ocean was about 200 miles away from Cape Cod. So we're interested in the outer continental shelf also because of the importance of the Bahamas, particularly in terms of trade in and out of the Caribbean, or the Caribbean, whatever we say, and pirate activity. I'm also interested in the Bahamas. So what do we do in Bermuda? Well, I've been running a program in Bermuda. This is the island of Bermuda, and I run an underwater archaeology field school there. So this is my sort of clue, my lead into the way that I think this might work, at least for me. The problem with Bermuda is that all this light area over here is reef system. So you want to see it, but you don't want to get too close to it. Unfortunately, for many mariners, they did manage to get a little bit too close to it, and they wreck on the reef system. And the reef system, therefore, houses somewhere in the order of at least 200, maybe 250 shipwrecks. They date right back to the 16th century. So we go out each year and we stay right here, right on the end of the island. We stay at the Royal Navy dockyard out there. That's what that place looks like. But there are many things that we might be able to do if we were to be able to go out there with a larger platform and with the resources and facilities that a platform might be able to offer us. These are the accommodations. They're a little bit sparse. So we do have some company. The largest cockroaches in the world live here. And we also have the scrawniest sheep in the world that are around that perform dual functions. See, they take the grass cut and they fertilize the grass in equal measure. And we go out each day and we work very, very hard, as you can see here. But we work from these small boats and we are limited to relatively inshore work. And there's a whole area of the ocean right off Bermuda that's very important historically that we could access if we could go out there with a larger vessel. One of the ways that we look for shipwrecks is that we put the students in the water, and we put them behind a boat, and they hold onto boards, and this is very systematic. We go in lines, controlled by GPS, and they look at the bottom, and they hold onto these boards, and they use the movement of water over their body and over the board to take them below the water, and they go up and over the coral reefs, and they look for anchors and guns and so forth. And the students affectionately call it trolling for sharks. And certainly we find shipwrecks. This is the remains of an American Civil War blockade runner. During the Civil War, the South was supplied by vessels that ran the Union blockade of the South, and this is one of those vessels. This is a big boiler here. This is a big plate that would have been on the deck, but the smokestack would have come through. If you go around the side of the boiler, you see there's the paddle wheel here. And so this is fairly easy to recognize as a shipwreck. Other shipwrecks are not quite so easy to identify. This looks like a pile of stones on the bottom of the ocean. And the reason it looks like that is because this is a pile of stones on the bottom of the ocean. But the stones used to be ballast stones, and what happened was when this vessel sank, the stones pinned the hull to the bottom of the ocean, and the superstructure was eaten away by a whole series of physical, chemical, and biological processes. And so what you end up with is a pile of stones under which there is still the remains of the hull structure. So some of the things around the site that are a little bit more recognizable. This is a cannon that's not very far away. This is a little bit more difficult to see, to identify. And you think, well, that's not very much use. But if you were to bring it to the surface and to conserve it, it looks like this. So these sites have a lot of potential. And so we've been going out each year, but there is a tremendous amount that we could add if we went out as part of a coordinated research program on board a sail training ship. So this is my final thought here. I envision that maybe, just maybe one day, we could have a summer cruise to Bermuda on the Oliver Hazard Perry. Maybe we could have 6 to 9 credits. Maybe those credits could involve history and archaeology, maybe literature, maybe some other projects, some other elements. I think that the celestial navigation, navigational parts are very important. We could do a lot of work on the way out. The students we could have diving and non-diving components. There could be a whole series of things that we did when we were in Bermuda. We could have faculty, student research projects when we got there, and then we could all come home again. And so that's my final slide.
No, thank you. It's a real honor to be here. It's a very special conversation that's beginning, and I think so much good has been shared today, and I hope to add a few things along the way. Of course, I'm asked to speak to secondary and middle school educational possibilities and so on. Everyone has a happy place, right? When you're on the 18th hole and you're about to putt and the game is on the line, or you're Charlie Shoe and you're just about to cross that last tack and finish the race in your beautiful shields, you go to a happy place so you calm down, right? And you find peace. So I want everybody to close your eyes, and when I tell you to open, you can open. But I want you to go to your happy place, wherever that is. Did you get there? No, you're supposed to wake up. This is the best part of the day. Well, let's imagine that we can take our kids to a happy place which is the Oliver Hazard Perry. Let's imagine that you're beginning to envision that your children, school children throughout Rhode Island, charter schools, public schools, independent private schools, Montessori schools, parochial schools, colleges, and that we can create an environment where kids from different schools can go together. They can get to rub elbows with each other. They get to know each other. Wouldn't that be a happy place for all of us? Because we all know that the future of this country and this state is in educating our young people. We also know that the adult fears are what really hold our children back and our students back. So we want to be able to move to a place where they're not afraid to try something new. They're not afraid to join a community of learners. Now raise your hand if you've experienced this. Seeing the green flash, Raise them high. Okay. You've heard wind in the rigging. You've seen sunrise and sunset in the ocean. Right now you can feel the water under your hull. And last but not least, you can smell the sea. Well, see, it's not just technology that can make the distance very, very short. This life at sea, 5th graders, 12th graders, college students. Students are not passengers. They're active crew members. They study, as Tom put it, a rigorous curriculum, applied mathematics, seamanship skills, history, and more. Allow me to explore some of what we already know and some of the value we may not initially consider. Learning for life provides opportunities for social and collaborative learning. 5th graders, grown adults. Learning for life on board promotes creative problem solving and innovative thinking. Could the state of Rhode Island use with more innovative thinkers? I think so. I once captained a boat on which at one point or another almost everything broke. Thankfully, this tall ship, the sails and hulls remained intact, so we weren't in actual danger ever. In 1 week, the water tanks, both engines, one prop, the windlass, and the head system all had issues multiple times. On day 13 of our journey, the port engine overheated and the starboard prop broke. After an extremely challenging day, this culminated in us having to sail directly upwind into a channel that had shallow reefs close to the channel markers on both sides, without the use of either engine. We had to use the ski boat to help the boat tack around fast enough to stay out of danger. The 10th, 9th, and 10th grade students were extremely calm, patient, and responsive during the entire day. Before setting foot on the boat, none of my 10 students had much sailing experience, if any at all. As a result of all these bad things happening to our boat, my 10 students learned more about boat systems than they became so good at sailing on and off of the mooring that they would ask to do so instead of leaving by engine, and further challenge themselves by asking to do so silently. By the end of the 17 days, the students had full control of the boat, barely needing my supervision, and were still choosing to sail on and off the mooring balls. They really became rock stars. I think that's so powerful. And that our kids could have an opportunity to experience this by just being on the Oliver Hazard Perry. Experiences and lessons which last a lifetime. These lessons and experiences inspire confidence, self-knowledge, challenge our students personally and collectively, encourage our students to take appropriate risks, to do things never before tried by them, and to adapt to changes in their environment. What might it look like to take 5th through 8th graders on board? At Rocky Hill, we're fortunate enough to have a 50-foot floating classroom. It's a catamaran. But interestingly, in our younger grades, here are some of the experiences that in our pilot programs we have seen occur. Latin classes, out at 5:30 at night, going up the river, and they are reciting in Latin.
digital photography classes, going up and down the bay, taking pictures, helping young people to be able to begin to appreciate the environment that they're in. Math classes, going and taking pictures of trees along the waterside and trying to determine geometrically how tall they are based on their shadows in the water. Physics classes, moving across the river, trying to understand what a vector is, how a boat moves through the water with the engine off, what wave action is, and on and on. There's so many opportunities for us to, in real ways, help our children when they're on board. Imagine there's a model already in place. You have young children, children from a charter school in inner city Providence, or kids in a high school environment who've never been near a boat. The Oliver Hazard Perry doesn't have to be offshore to teach. It can be tied to the dock. We can take our children there. They can role play. They can provision the boat. They can make their own bunk. They can find their way around. They can stand at the wheel. They can see what the blocks do. They can participate in hoisting a sail, and the boat never has to leave the dock. This doesn't have to be an unsettling experience. How many adults want to participate and have never experienced this for themselves? So as a training platform and as an educational opportunity for our young children and for our older students in secondary school, there needs to be no concern for safety. There needs only to be the hope that by dreaming that we can allow our kids the opportunities to experience things they might never experience. Promoting working together. Kids from different backgrounds learning to appreciate and respect each other. Yes, you can write poetry. Yes, you can study maritime history. But at the end of the day, isn't it really fabulous to know that we're giving kids an opportunity to rub elbows with each other from inner city to suburbia to farmland. They're experiencing something greater than themselves. They're living by rules. I mean, Tom said it, and actually your second career will be as a headmaster, because sex, drugs, and rock and roll I preach against all the time. But really, this is about living by rules, living in a disciplined environment, being told that you will do something and living up to that, having a moral compass, having the fiber within yourself to make good decisions for the right reasons, because they affect not only you, but they affect everyone else on board. Art, music, reading. I thought it was great when you were talking about sea shanties. Well, and think about the folks in the whaling boats, whaling ships. Long ago, who taught them? Who were the people who gave them the art classes to be able to do that fabulous work? They learned from each other. They learned by trying. They learned by taking risks, not because some teacher was standing in front of them telling them that now you must do it this way. The mention about it being green, of course it's green. It's wind. It's on the oceans. What more could you want for your kids? In the ocean state, no less. We can all learn calculus, and we can all learn physics. We can all learn chemistry. And having a classroom that floats and being able to go out into the natural environment and experiencing that is only going to make it come more alive. And we understand that. However, you could learn all those things in a classroom, but until you touch them, you smell them, you feel them, then it never comes alive. The Oliver Hazard Perry will allow that to come alive. And as I said before, it's learning for life, forever. We were able to meet and overcome and face our fears, something that scared me. Climbing the rigging, going out on the bowsprit, jumping off the boat, night swimming, performing ordinary tasks that we may never have done before, cooking for 15 hours, things breaking, wrapped props, course changes, dealing with discomfort, Cold, wet, hot, no showers, dirty clothes, annoying crewmates, homesickness, food we don't like, having to clean, pulling a bad watch, learning to listen carefully and respond quickly. Because we discover that our safety, happiness, and well-being is dependent upon that, and not just mine, someone else's as well. Choosing to challenge ourselves. Discovering that there are tasks that we actually like to do. Tying the secondary, spot, cook, etc., and learn to trade responsibilities with our crewmates for a level of fairness and happiness. We get in trouble, but we understand and accept the consequences. Why didn't our parents ever hold us accountable? Why would our teachers back in our schools allow us to look the way we did, to say the things we did, to arrive without our work done? That doesn't happen here. We're part of something greater than me. We're part of something greater. We watch for difficult and bad situations to develop, and guess what? Sometimes they become good because we help to make them so. We learn to communicate on a whole new level. It's almost as if we don't need words. We value things and people that we used to take for granted. We appreciate the role of the teacher in our lives. Why? Because we found out that the teacher was a person too. We go through all these challenges with the same small group of people, forming strong bonds, very quickly, as if there is no place to hide. We learn to give and gain strength with dignity. So it's through these experiences that we see that our own classrooms on land can do part of the job. But we want our children to get skin knees. We want our children to smell the salt air. We want our children to see their first dolphin. We want them to understand what it might have been to be on board 200, 300 years ago. We want them to be in a position to be acceptable to college environments where they can make a difference, where they are young people of character. It doesn't matter where they go to college. It matters that they have character and purpose, that they have a love for learning, and that they enjoy being a part of our solution. These opportunities help young people to know themselves, to find their own voices and strength, to appreciate their weaknesses as not being embarrassments. And they learn to work and play together. And isn't that something that we could use a lot more of? They're eager to meet the challenges that often hold others back. We must teach forward into a future that our students and we can only dream about. I will tell you that he isn't here today, but Dave Burnham, great friend and wonderful educator, had contacted me and said, this is one of those rare opportunities that you need to be involved with. And it is. And we can make a difference for our children and for future generations by understanding that learning doesn't just happen in a closed classroom. That it happens when our kids have an opportunity to explore beyond their normal boundaries, which is why this has attracted me. I hope that you will join me and encourage others to teach forward into a future that we can only dream about and make it real for our students today. Thank you.
How do you convince public schools that seem to be directing more and more efforts to worksheets and computer programs that are based solely on increasing test scores to embrace this experiential learning?
Well, I think from my perspective that engaged learners are going to do really well on tests because they're going to want to come back tomorrow and learn more. And so what we have to do is take the approach that by exposing our kids at a young age, at 5th grade age right on through, and having them come back year after year
over a period of time and being inspired, that the kid who sleeps in class, the kid who's not interested in doing his homework, the kid who says, I'm not going to go back to school tomorrow, may well be inspired to go to school tomorrow because he or she for the first time understood what a vector was and why it was important, or is going to understand the relationship between his or her desire to be a wonderful artist. And art is everything. As Caroline said, suddenly art becomes more than just art because I'm involved with other people and I'm learning from them. So the pressure for grades and for scores and for state standards can only be enhanced by giving our children opportunities to build on their islands of competency and to have success somewhere where they say learning can be fun and I want to be a part of it.
We believe that with our public school systems, we have the ability to get people on board in much larger numbers for much shorter periods of time at a young age, to where we begin to invigorate them into thinking about this whole process. And we can do, I think we can do a lot in small time periods for that age group of kids. From what I'm learning about our public school system and those educational and testing requirements, I believe that probably as experiential education begins to rise and perhaps this knee-jerk testing for scores begins to be a decline, that we may be able to change some of these laws within our state so that there would be some opportunities to interface at a older level with high school. We're right now, Bonnie Sexton, who's actually here, is working for us on a Rhode Island Foundation grant that we got to study this specific subject as to how do we proceed to figure out how our program will integrate within the public and charter school system. I mean, clearly our model includes the thought that we would do some corporate fundraising for a limited number of junior and senior students that would join in a cooperative program that, like Jim has talked about. But those are small numbers, and they need to be at the end. That's what people aspire to, having gotten inspiration at the low level when all the fifth graders, from the Duffy School get to go out because we bring the ship up to Providence or the Oliver Hazard Ferry School. But so these are all things that we don't know the answers to yet, and one of the reasons why we asked all of you people to come and here so that we could learn and begin to even just learn where the problems are, much less the solutions. But this is how we begin.
So my question is more along the lines of access and opportunity to some of these programs. Everything that's been presented today sounds incredible. Some great opportunities for our kids. So my question is, what do you think expenses are like per student for some of these programs? Especially coming from, for example, in my district, we're looking at cutbacks of 64% of our budget over the next 10 years from our new wonderful funding formula. So how do you foresee that may look or happen?
Our business plan, we've used the rates of return that are sort of common within the industry, and I actually don't have those in my head. But essentially, the next step with any one of the program that we might put together with an institution, whether it's URI or some Met school or whatever else, is looking at all of those dynamics. We don't even know yet, because we haven't built the ship yet, we don't really know for sure exactly what the costs are going to be. But what we do know, because we have a lot of methods of supporting this ship, is that it doesn't all have to be on the back of one particular high school or the whole high school system. I mean, everybody is pulling their own weight. So we know that we come out ahead of any institution that would build a platform like this or buy one to do something like we're talking about. We can provide the same experience for much less money. So developing a specific business plan with a specific institution is one of the next steps that we will be working with any of the groups that come forward to partner with us.
Please join us in the next room for refreshments. And again, thanks to our speakers for some really inspiring presentations.